الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده والنبيه ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Today, alhamdulillah, beginning the khutbah al-Jumah, praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, thanking Allah for having established for us the tradition of the prayer, and especially the prayer, alhamdulillah, of the Jumah. Abandoning, alhamdulillah, in the noon hour, all of our worldly activities to answer the call of Allah. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this gift that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam reminds us about Yawm al-Jumu'ah, saying that there is in it, in Yawm al-Jumu'ah, a particular sa'ah, a particular hour in which anyone who with sincerity prays and asks Allah, that Allah will grant their supplication. So sometime today, inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the dua that you make in this Jumu'ah, that Allah might grant you that which you require, that alhamdulillah, if it's good for you, that Allah give it to you. That if it's not good for you, that Allah replace it with something that is better. And alhamdulillah, if you don't receive it in this life, that Allah would grant you that in the hereafter. Today I want to remind us that today, alhamdulillah, is a significant day, in that today is the first probably re-establishment of the Jumu'ah prayer on the West Campus of Howard University. And it happens to be today, Charter Day, the day of the founding of Howard University. And alhamdulillah, in that we see a sense of establishment of, and for us, the idea of iqamatuddin, establishing the worship of Allah, that it is not just enough to say La ilaha illallah, Muhammadan Rasulullah, that I believe in Allah. The next then is to establish salah. Establish the worship of Allah wherever you are. We are blessed in the deen of Islam that you are not required to have a consecrated space. Some religious traditions, there has to be some special space for it. But alhamdulillah, the Prophet ﷺ has informed us that Allah told him that the whole world is a place for prostration. And so Muslims weren't confined just to being in Makkah, that they could, under the oppression that they lived under, they were free when Allah revealed this in the Quran to travel, and they traveled under the guidance of Rasulullah ﷺ to Habasha, because Allah had informed them that they were free to travel to worship anywhere, not just in Makkah. And the Prophet ﷺ reminds us that he said, you will find there a king, a ruler, who is a Christian, and in whose land no man is wronged, no man or woman. And so it was in that place that Muslims were able to establish, to worship freely in what we call Habasha or Abyssinia or Ethiopia. And it laid the foundation as the first hijrah. Today I want to talk briefly, we don't have much time, but to talk briefly about an understanding that I want you to reflect upon. And that is that in the journeys of humankind, since we just came out of so-called Black History Month, the shortest month of the year, established by a Washingtonian, Carter G. Woodson, and reminding us something about the history of those people who had migrated from Africa to the Americas. And in that journey, just to remind us that in the work of Ivan van Sertima, they came before Columbus. And so there are reports as early or earlier, but the documented reference I have is around 1312, that the brother of Mansa Musa, the famous Mansa Musa who made his pilgrimage to Mecca, that his brother Abu Bakr II migrated from West Africa to the Caribbean. And they claim in the recorded notes that he sailed with 1,000 ships, traveling across the Atlantic using the navigation of the stars, knowing that the world is not flat, that, alhamdulillah, there was a pre-Columbian establishment, not just of Africans in the New World, but of Muslims in the New World. That it would be over a century later that Columbus would come to America after the Spanish drove the Moors out of Spain, remembering that Tariq Ziyad and his armies opened Spain 800 years previously and governed Spain and brought Europe out of the Dark Ages with the light of the knowledge from the Quran, the Sunnah, and the history and science, technology that was resident within the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But after 8 centuries of Islamic rule, the Spanish, Portuguese, they pushed Muslims out of Spain. But it's with the help of 2 of the descendants of the Moors that they captained 3 ships, the Nina, Pinta, and the Santa Maria, and they come to the Americas. 2 of the captains are Muslim descendants. I don't know how good their Islam was, but the records say that they were descendants of Moors who had governed Spain until that year when Columbus sailed. And so you have Muslims coming to the Americas before Columbus, with Columbus, and then with the unfortunate circumstance of the transatlantic slave trade. Some estimate maybe 100 million Africans come from the west coast of Africa in chains to the Americas. And I'm going to offer you a perspective today, which is to stop calling these individuals slaves. That for us as Muslims, if I am an abd, if I am a person who is given my free will away without any compensation to serve, then I am to be Abdullah, to be a servant of Allah. That these enslaved Africans were in fact prisoners of war. The slave trade was stimulated by taking prisoners of war and then selling your prisoners to Europeans. And so perhaps in trying to restore some of the humanity of these individuals, to call them prisoners of war rather than slaves. It's estimated by Henry Louis Gates from Harvard that out of those who were transported in the transatlantic slave trade, about 10 million actually survived the Middle Passage. And out of them, an estimated 1/3 were Muslim, coming from the countries in West Africa that today are Muslim, and 400 years ago they were Muslim. So that means that during the period of the transatlantic slave trade, there were more Muslims in America then than, according to Pew, than there are now. that would put us around 3.33 million Muslims during the period of the transatlantic slave trade. But I want to turn our attention, we're at a law school, and we think about law, Dr. Al-Alwani, in the Islamic terms as Sharia. I don't want to get too deep into the issues of Sharia. What I want to talk about today are the objectives of Sharia, what we call maqasid al-Sharia. And I'm so grateful, alhamdulillah, to the work of IIIT, the International Institute for Islamic Thought, for having taken on the required study to unearth for us and then to translate into the English language many books about Islam that should inform and shape what Islam means in our contemporary reality. And one of the great books that they had translated by Ibn Ashur is his treatise on Maqasid al-Sharia. I accepted Islam at Howard University over 30 years ago, that's all I'll say. It wasn't until maybe 10 years ago that I learned about the science of Maqasid al-Sharia. What are the objectives of Sharia? What are the objectives when we dissect not the letter of the law, but what is the law trying to achieve? Ibn Ashur writes, in studying scholars that predated him by hundreds of years, he said there are three main categories: needs, necessities, and desires. Let's talk about desires. They're tahsinat, things that bring beauty to life. And I'm saying this because sometimes in English, even though my Arabic is terrible, but I like to think about the Arabic language, especially for non-Arabs, like you think about icons on a computer. That when you click on an icon, it opens you up to other information which is behind the icon. If you don't know which icon to click, then you're blocked from accessing the other parts of the program. And so, iconically, tahsinat, desires, things that bring beauty to life. A person in their home, they have a tablecloth. Well, you can eat without a tablecloth, but the tablecloth, the ma'idah, it brings beauty to your dining. The other one, he talks about hajat, things which are needs. We translate as needs. They're things that make life easier. They bring convenience. So a table in a home, you put the tablecloth, the tahsinat, on top of the hajat. Because many people will say, if you're a young married person, you don't have a table, one of the spouses, I'm not going to say which one of the spouses is going to say, we need a table. It's a necessity. You say it's not a necessity. It's a convenience. You can eat on the floor. But in the society we live in, table is hajat. It provides some convenience. You can sit in your chair and you don't have to worry about your knees and so on. It's convenience. But what is dururiyat? What are the necessities? And I like to think about Warhuddin Muhammad rahimahullah, because he talked about the necessities of human life. If you think about people coming out of the institution of bondage, of enslavement, and you think about what they were told are the necessities of life, they would tell you that there's food and clothing and shelter. And this is what they were given and what we have been taught about the necessities of life.